welcome back to this channel Misery Reactions, where I'll bring you the best reactions from YouTube. For those new here, I'm Robert from the channel Mislead Loyalty, and I love sharing my honest opinions on the most viral and trending videos of the moment. You know how it is. I sit here, we watch the content together, and I give you my most authentic, unfiltered reaction. What you see is what you get, pure sincerity and good vibes. Today we have a video that is breaking the internet, and I couldn't help but share my reaction. But before we start, if you like the content, support it by liking, subscribing, and activating the bell so you don't miss any reactions. And if you'd like to see more content like this or have suggestions for reaction videos, leave them in the comments. Let's get started with today's video. Thanks for being here. See you in the next video.
Hey, muy buenas noches, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. Well, everyone, as always, first and foremost, thank you, everyone, for everyone's words, wishes, prayers, and the love and support you guys extend my way. And well, as you guys can see, like I have been promising, we're going to do a reaction on this new reaction channel. Of course, my apologies first and foremost. You guys know I'm a dinosaur, and I'm trying, so you'll be learning with me, right? Well, today's reaction is going to be circled around, a man I respect. I think he's a real good person, right? Besides the point of anything. I know a lot of people are going to be like, it's weird because he used to be a CEO. I used to be an inmate. I speak on I would never, whatever, right? But this is different. You guys know I'm here for the message. And I think this is a great opportunity to actually put a message in full. What do I mean by that? There's a lot of talk about curfews on prison yards, no good yards, no stay yards, whatever, right? And you guys know, in every way, shape, or form, I tend to stay away from speaking about any other race or faction. This would include COs because, first and foremost, I was a part of something. I don't know the in and outs of no other faction, right? So, out of respect, I tend to keep away from them type of conversations. But again, I respect Hector because he always maintains with what he knows. He don't get involved in that extra just due to the swinging of YouTube, right? Algorithm or numbers, and that's respectful. I also can understand his point of view. We're from two different worlds, you could say that, but nevertheless, respect's given where it's due, right? As you guys know, the only interview I've done with him for the same reason, because I think it's a full message, right? From both sides put together, and it gives a better inside look on how person really is. Nevertheless, I don't want to take you guys' time too long. This video is gonna circle around, of course, non-designated yards, and it goes with: can you go to prison, keep your head down, program, basically do what you have to do as whatever faction you belong to, right? When things come to shove, but there is things that are accurate that happen that sometimes you have no control of, as you guys was here. Anyways, let's get started on this reaction, and let's look at what Hector has to say a little bit, right? And then I'll be stopping it and putting my perspective out. Again, I hope it comes out to you guys' likings, and most of all, that it's understandable, right?
Prison, right? Old school prison. I could reminisce, take a walk down memory lane. I don't know. He's like an old war veteran that just can't let it go, right? And has to reminisce. So shout out to him. Go check out his channel. That was the topic. The video in particular that I was watching was curfews. Curfews on prison yards. Well, what does that mean, Hector? As you know, my side of the story is from the green side, the correctional officer's perspective, right? That's the beauty of this. Kind of get to see two different sides, polar opposite sides within the system, talk about kind of the same topic, which is kind of cool. I think so. Curfews. What is a curfew in a nutshell? A curfew in a nutshell is inmates that are affiliated with a certain group, organization, or gang have a specific time limit to get off of a yard they are housed on by any means necessary, usually through violence. That's the way to get off. Now, if you're a correctional officer in 2025, you have 5 years or below.
Well, to extend a little bit on what he's saying, curfews, at least as a sureño, a campolero, right? Southside or whatever you want to call me. Our curfews, at least in my time, were more so when the yards were active. We had them all up north. Solano. Even in Folsom, there was a time there was a curfew on there on the 180, right? And more so it had to do with what CDC, as you would hear from Hector, was doing, which was always flipping yards. I remember one time Tehachapi 180B yard was back and forth, right? Between good, bad, uh, PC 5050 XX, and it was one of them no landing zones for us. At one point, we had 24 hours, 72 hours, and any more time we spend on there, you would be considered no good. That meant your own people was going to go after your jugular, right? Anyways, like he says, on his point of view, it's just simple, right? There is no, it's just curfews as anybody, right? But nevertheless, politics play out, at least from our end. What I mean by that is there's a lot of Mexican mafia members, Pilis, that play around with this a lot. And of course, at the same time, they're playing around with your career per se, more so with you getting hit, right? And be thrown to one of them no good yards. The same yards you're being put curfews on. Anyways, let's continue a little bit more.
Breakdown of Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility throughout the non-designated program, the mixing of inmates under Jeff McCumber's California model, and what those curfews look like for those certain gangs. You guys already know. They dropped the California model. Well, they dropped the non-designated program on our laps. Didn't say shit. Fucking just, hey, all of a sudden, dudes started showing up on buses that were being housed in motherfucking yards they should not have been fucking housed on. Right? PC, GP. That easy, man. But Hector, why? Can't they just get mixed? Shut the fuck up and make it wink. Sorry, I got my daughter over there.
And what I want to say about this is, I wasn't, you could say, in the system for that integrating type of thing, right? That kind of happened after the shoe kick out. 2015, around March. Yeah, I believe so. I went to the feds, right? The feds picked me up. They took me to the feds. And that designated yard push from CCR came after the shoe kick out. It started in level 2s, level 1s. But Hector here is going to speak about a myth that a lot of people talk without knowledge, right? Again, Hector speaks from the green side, so he has that knowledge, right? Again, me as an inmate, for me saying so, is not believable as much, right? But anyway, we'll continue a little bit right here with what Hector's saying. Just do excuse me a second. Here it is.
All right, damn, Hector, that's a juicy ass backstory. Gracias a ti, tu Celi. Yes, So Hector, you were a lieutenant during this time, right? Yup. You had started at Centinela State Prison, right? Yup. Level 4 GP killers, Charlie Yard, the White House. Mm-hmm. So you knew what time it was, right, Hector? Yeah, I fucking knew as a lieutenant. I was assigned to Delta Yard, lieutenant. Best yard in the state, formerly known as the 4 Yard. Oh man, so much dope on that yard. Everybody was happy. Everybody was happy.
Just to extend on that, you know, all the level fours are mostly all calm because CDC they tend to play games a lot, but they know level four is not just going to be a bloodbath, but usually it's going to be a lot of lives that will be taken out, right? Be hurt, or a lot of people. Well, you guys get it. But anyways, let's continue a little bit.
So when they started to bring these bad inmates, protective custody inmates, onto the yard, they immediately, the Southerners, started to get off on them. Immediately. First, I think it was with hands. It could have been with weapons right away. Now, this is level 3 GP. Slicing them for sure, stabbing them for sure. In the cut, there's some blind spots where the gunner can't see. Motherfucking people showing up with slice wounds, stab wounds, just like, hey, I gotta go.
Okay, you see the perspective of a CO. You know, we just start getting off, but you see behind the scenes is everybody's being pressured, and you know there is cases where they put your whole neighborhood on your back, right? For example, if you decide to stay, we're gonna green light. We're gonna, those were the games that were being played. There still are, and what it means, yeah, immediately everybody started getting off. In the beginning, it was heard a lot, right? That the camaradas or any race, they were taking flight, right? As time went on, there was a lot of them that sat. They basically they didn't want nothing to do with it. They wanted to program, to go home. You see, they started in these lower levels, but was the end was being put out from this end to homies is 72 hours. 72 hours, that means if you were already on the yard period, you had 72 hours to get off, regardless on how you did it. You know, there is funny ways though to get off the yard that has repercussions. Remember, nothing you do in prison will always be as clear as water. What I mean by that is sometimes things that look bad, even though you get off the yard, you're still gonna be received back there with a pedazo for certain reasons. As I will get into uh, a little bit further down the video, I want to continue reacting to Hector Bravo a little bit.
A yard. It got to the point where they got hit with a 72-hour curfew from their people. By
I
then, the
want to
heavy hitters were out of the shoe. I can only imagine it was through cell phone. Hey, you got this yard, whatever yard you are now on, is it been deemed no good? Get off, get out, go away, right? And I remember that 72-hour curfew. There was a freaking AW, man. This fucking guy, dude. We were in the chapel, A yard. I went over from Delta to go be nosy in Alpha. And this freaking.
again here Hector speaks about that 72 hours, right? It is a curfew, but you got to remember, at least at this time, you have individuals that are in prison that believe me, they ain't about the people. What I mean by that is they're looking at everything to make money off you. You know, you might have been sacked at 72 hours, you're still gonna get fined by I don't know, 500, $1,000, and if you can't pay it, your family can't pay it, you're gonna pay it in blood. And as Hector speaking right here, level threes, most of every level three is going home. So again, it goes back to what you guys asked me. Can you go down there in prison, put your head down, and just put yourself in this position when it's a card thing? Yes, you can, right? But there is a lot of games, as you guys are noticing. If it ain't from the organizations, It's from the, you know, from CDC. They tend to set up things so that not only will their own people get hurt, but at the same time, at the end of the day, they want their goal to be met. They never sit down and think, oh, you're gonna lose time. A lot of people are gonna lose their time, their date. If it's in a level 4 where lifers are at, you know, they're gonna miss that board, to go home. No, they want to meet their goal, what they want, and like Hector says, out of the blue they start throwing buses. It's exactly what Tehachapi was doing. You know, two buildings of good dudes, two buildings of bad dudes, and then just let them all out and see where it headed. Right? There was a lot of camaradas that at one point were coming there from the shoe because it was a 180, right? And I'm pretty sure there was a lot of them that wanted to go see board, but they had 72 hours to get off that yard. And what are you going to do? Any means necessary to get off that yard. But again, let's continue a little bit. I hope I'm covering Hector Bravo's daughter good. But let me just say this. You see my respect. This is what it's about, family. As you guys been with me for a while, you guys know it's what we should all just focus on, right? That's what is true. Let's continue a little bit.
Now, there's not a freaking thing anybody in green or with a badge or with a magic wand can stop that. That's a fact. So they got hit with that 72-hour curfew, which means you have 3 days. 3 days, by any means necessary, get off the yard, usually through violence. Probably 113% per violence. Well, what about the blacks, Hector? What about the blacks? What about it? They were cool. They were cool. They were chilling, posted West Coast. Ain't nobody tripping. What's some blood? Crip.
Anyways, I'll stop it right here. You know, Hector does his thing his way. I know a lot of people misunderstand his sense of humor, but again, he's a good individual. He has my respect for a lot of reasons, right? But anyways, what he's saying about brothers, right? You guys know I don't really speak about other races, but let me just say this, I've seen recently a lot of videos where a lot of people say, "Oh, Southsiders are telling brothers how to handle their 50-50 yard or their people, right, that come from there." I want to touch on two. I want to say two things about this. First and foremost, that's a lie. Whoever's telling you this is telling you for bait on YouTube. Cause brothers do what brothers want, and that includes cribs, blood, gummies, whatever. Right? They have their own program. They don't follow no one program. Now, with Southside telling them how to do their program, that will never happen. Believe me, it would never happen. Why I say this? Brothers ain't gonna tolerate it. They're gonna boot up, suit up, and go to war with us. All this sense of, oh, everybody fears or they're scared of this. Ain't nobody scared of nobody. It's a thing called caution in prison, right? They don't want problems out of respect. But going back on a personal note, right? All the 180s I went on, or in the three shoes I was in, at least, right? I've seen it. If brothers came from their yard, it might have been not like us, right? Within hours taken care of, but they did take care of their people. They weren't tolerating people coming from their yards, period. Again, it's difficult, right? It's like the brothers looking in on us, right? It's like, for example, them just putting us in a circle all as Mexicans, Latinos, right? And expecting all of us to run the same program when it's not going to happen. Why? Because Sureños have their program, Norteños have their program, Bulldogs, despise us. Even though we run together, they still take care of their people, their way, their style, you know. And it's exactly the thing with them, right? Yeah, they're brothers. They're all one people, like we are. But in that same people, there's Crips, Bloods, there's Kumis, there's numerous of factions. And it's like us telling a norteño how to do the program. They're gonna say, okay, come back strapped, and we're more likely gonna go to war and get hit, right? It's the same with them. They run their program their way. And again, I don't know the ins and outs, so I'm not on my respect to it. But I did hear that in the lower levels, they were pretty much letting it go, right? But again, it's where this flip was happening a lot to the point that everybody's going home. You know, to tell a brother, hey, you got to do something and then mess your date up, you ain't gonna do that. I think as a whole, as a race, as Chicanos, Mexicanos, we're the only ones that don't really think about dates, right? We're in there, we're boogieing, we're we'll boogie down however is required, and date streets come secondary. But anyways, let's continue a little bit more, and then we'll stop this and call it a quits. Do excuse the delay. I'm still trying to get the hang of
With
this.
her at Centinela. She was the lieutenant over there. From 6 in the morning to 10 at night, nonstop staff assaults. But how, Hector? How can it be nonstop staff assaults? Don't they slam the yard? There was no slamming nothing. There was no stopping it. Administration wanted to force that integration. They were walking to pill line. Every time a cell door opened, whether it was to cell feed, they were coming out blasting cops. That's a fact. They remember. Whoever was on AR that day remembers. In the TTA, good old, I think he's a sergeant now, escorted the inmate, Sureño. The Sureño said, Spensa. Fuck, CO turned, cold clocked him. Boom! Now, what I will say about that. Ooh, I believe that inmate regretted doing that because as I was responding to the TTA for the staff assault, thankfully a good CO that I knew from Centinela said, hey, LT, we got it. Don't go in there. We got it. I said, phew, you just saved my fucking life. Oh, what, Hector? You're the green wall now? You letting excessive use of force happen? Dude, he hit a cop. I didn't go in there. I can't truthfully tell you what happened. I can assure it didn't end well for that youngster. Period. That's a fact. You know I'd be telling the truth. I tell the truth, huh, baby? Mommy hates me? Ah!
Well, anyways, we're gonna stop it right here. But before I go, I want to touch on 2 points that Hector touched on right now, right? That I think are important. First and foremost, you hear this green wall, seals on inmate stuff, and it's all of a sudden it's how do I say it? It's everybody's in their panties, right? Hurt. My response is why, right? At the end of the day, let's keep it a book. Everyone's a group. For example, me as a Southsider, as a Campolero, right? I walk in the tier, minding my business. There's a camarada in front of me, right? He might be a little 5150, a little J Cat, and I don't know where he takes off on a seal. My obligation is no questions asked. I'm to jump in and take off on him, right? Now the coins are flipped. You know, you're taking off on Judas, you're taking off on the COs. So why is it so unexpected or out of the blues for the COs to put tips on you? You know, well, I'll just go like this. In the cell extraction I had in Ironwood, they do put tips on you, and it's a common thing. But again, like Hector saying, it all comes down to pressure, right? For example, they got a job to do. We have a job to do. And unfortunately, our job is just to follow some dolphins' calls, rules, and regulations. What I mean by this, you see, it comes a point, like Hector saying, where it goes from 72 hours to 24 hours. Now that's putting pressure on somebody, right? And what I mean by this, if you're to get off, you're to get off, period. But let's say you're close to the 24 hours and you come out to peel and there's nobody around but a CO, what are you going to do? To follow that man's wishes and calls, you're going to whack a CO, right? Get off that yard. Any means necessary, right? And they're in the right. They're in the right to put tips on you. Which person, if you guys can answer me, outside of prison is gonna allow you to hurt their people and you not to react? I mean, after all, they're doing their job. And let me touch on another thing on this. A lot of camaradas, they get off the yard exactly like Hector's saying, right? They want to stay as long as possible. For example, they had time to get off. There's always time to get off. Believe me. If there's time to get off in the shoe where we were walked handcuffed, there's time to get off on the main line, any main line. They decided to stay, and then now they're being pressured. So the best thing is to take off on a huda, right? And start stabbing a CO just to get off the yard. I understand it because CDC also plays games the higher ups, right? For example, you put tips on a huda, just knuckles, right? You used to go to the shoe. With no shoes now, you come back out to yard. So it's you come back out, time keeps going. And it just goes back to what I was saying. Dope fiends. See, in this discussion, Hector's speaking about Sueños, Southsiders, right? And how they were getting off on the yard. But let me say this. You're ruining your life. Especially in these level threes, people are going to go home. I understand, staying active, keeping your name, your palabra on the streets good, inside, from all them people like, hey, que chingón. But if you get back there where a Pili, a Mexican mafia is at, for taking off on a jura, believe me, you're gonna get your ears smacked back. Cause you see, Hector in this video also speaks about everybody, all the CEOs knew what was gonna happen. There's this thing, right? When I was active in the shoe, everybody's telling, I'm not gonna say everybody, but there's a big portion of people dropping kites, telling the CEOs even what color of panties you're wearing. Or, you guys get it, they're all telling on how everything, orders come down. Let me just say this, the ones that are always talking to the CEOs is the Pilis. That's why they're always so close. A lot of people think it's because of their power. There's cases where certain captains bring down Pilis to their facilities just because he knows he's going to keep him in the loop on everything that's happening on the yard. So all that, it's a myth, you know. Now, on the last thing I wanted to touch on, which is what Hector said here last, right? Let's hear it again a little
Hector,
bit.
you're the green wall now. You letting excessive use of force happen. Dude, he hit a cop. I didn't go in there. I can't truthfully tell you what happened. I can assure it didn't end well for that youngster. Period. That's a fact. I'd be telling the truth. I tell the truth, huh, baby?
He got stomped
Mommy hates me.
in. You know.
Ah! Those are curfews in a nutshell. Anything positive you want to say to the?
Anyways, he speaks on here. Also, what I wanted to say is the next thing, right? It's how tecatos work, dolphins. You see, a lot of camaradas, they were considered no good now because they decided to sit down and go home when all this started happening. They got sick of it. Here you have a perfect example, right? On how, due to their decisions, they're in a yard and they're even whacking CEOs to get off the yard because they're being pressured to, right? And it's understandable. It's part of the program, right? In there, we can't mix with them. But again, Hector said it clear, and I'll say it. Sometimes you get off, and we know, like he said, there's time and places they could have gotten off without taking it to that extent, right? And if not, it's understood, right? Everything comes out on paper, believe me. But anyways, what I meant is that hypocrite in this, right? They order camaradas to do this, get off, mess their dates up. They pick up a fierro against a jura. What do you think's gonna happen? At least another 15 balas on them, right? To do time. If you had 2, 3 years in the level 3, now you're doing close to 20. And guess what? You're going to a 180. And guess what? More than likely in the 180, you're gonna catch more time. To what extent, I wouldn't be able to tell you, right? But Pilis or Mexican mafia members started coming out to this same yard they put curfews on. And since they were there, they didn't have them sit on them the way people think. They didn't get off. You know, what they did do, since they were there, you see, the thing is with Mexican mafia members, a person that's there, that's the one that calls the shots. Ain't nobody can call a shot on a yard if there's a peeling on that yard. Period. They're not going to do that openly because they're more careful on how they politic against each other, per se, right? Because it's always happening again. But anyways, they were there and they started sitting down. What I mean by that, half of the vatos that stay there, that they were considered no good now, just because they stay there, here comes a Mexican mafia member and he wants to program. So he turns that yard, however it is at that moment, into a good yard now. So now, answer me this. Was it worth it for them camaradas to stab a CO, to get off at no means necessary? Of course, I'll be sincere. If I would have been there and a curfew happened, I would have been one gone ASAP. Any means necessary, right? It was just part of what it was. Just being sincere. So I do understand it. What I'm saying is, you're willing to give your life up, right? The only option you have is to take off on a CO. And you turn your 3 year sentence to a 20-year sentence. And here comes a Mexican mafia member. He lands in the same yard where you ruin your life, right? You ruin your family's life. And all of a sudden he says that yard is good. Everybody on that yard gets a pass. And then now within time it starts cleaning itself out, right? And just because he wants to program. So now tell me, what gives or what's the difference between them and other raza? Is that raza gives them power to do that? You see, most of them ain't never going home. Like I myself at one point was too, right? And they want to program. You know what that means? They want to get high, make money. So for them to lay down, get high, make money, it's worth more than you going home. Keep that in mind. Again, I think this was a great message as a whole. I reached out to Hector. Thank you for allowing me to react to this. Again, my highest respect to you. Blessings to family. Hector, if you ever see this, and everyone on here, my channel, I said it before, I'll say it again. Dude, please go out there, send some love to him, some respect. Let him know you're coming from over here, and subscribe to his channel. Support the person that are real. At this point, the ones that say from the mouth out that they're real, just sit back, analyze them. You'll see within time they take off their mask. Those who've been with me know exactly what I'm talking about. Hector's a good man. Again, he stays true to himself if you guys pay attention. And for that, mis respetos. But anyways, the whole point of this is hypocrisy, right? Curfews. A curfew is simply something that's set towards us, towards sureños, norteños, you know, and it's understandable, right? There was a yard that flipped one time. Well, wanted to flip, I think, in Pleasant Valley, if I'm correct. I was already in the Bay, 2007, and CCC was playing this game. What I mean, it was a whole peseta yard, right? And they were bringing small buses of camaradas, good homies, norteños, sureños, ex, but it was just a handful, right? And they were literally throwing them out there. And just because people on that side don't think they're not going to pull your wig, because they will. But anyways, the whole message of this is, don't buy it into that game plan that people say, I got to go in prison to earn my respect. Respect that what? More than likely you can earn your respect in prisons. There's a big chance you're going to get stuck in prison because somebody woke up mad today. And at the end of the day, you have to follow rules and regulations to the dot. If not, believe me, M members ain't needed. On camaradas that are right there kissing, you know what, will be the ones to politic on you. Remember, the closest ones to you are the ones that are going to be directed to move on you. So, anyways, what I'm trying to say is prison ain't a badge of honor. Take it from somebody that did 23 years, 11 months straight, 14 years in the shoe, Fed time. And I'm not counting the time in the feds and states in Mexico. You go in there, there's going to be a lot of heartaches, especially if you're like I was at one point, right? And I had big expectations of things, and unfortunately, it can never be like that because you got people that are more concentrated on money and dope than what we call causa, programa, carnalismo. So stay wise, stay true to yourself, and loyal to loved ones. Thank you. Please do leave a comment. Again, go to Hector, give him a like and a subscribe. Tell him I said hello. Thank you, Hector. God bless everyone. Please let me know what you think about this reaction. Buenas noches.
See you in the next video. Thank you for your time and for being part of this wonderful YouTube family. See you next time.